All right, this is the big one. This is the one that many Commanders fans have speculated, a man whose name has been rumored, and finally, things are starting to materialize because the Commanders will officially interview Al Harris. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Full Command Show. My name is Grant Mitchell, back with you all on this Thursday morning to discuss the big news of late last night. As people were drifting off to sleep, we got breaking reports that the Commanders had some interest in Al Harris, and then all of a sudden, they wanted to speak to Al Harris, and then all of a sudden, the Commanders will be interviewing Al Harris. Very quick domino effect, the chain reaction, it was just set off, and then bam, all of a sudden, they are going to be speaking to Al Harris. That was confirmed by ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, numerous reporters. This is happening. This is big news because we learned yesterday that Harris got his first interview of this entire cycle with the Packers. So are the Commanders responding quickly, or did they already have this planned? Guys, we're going to talk about that and answer some other questions. How should we feel about this? Who is Al Harris? What has he done? How would he do as the defensive coordinator? We're going to jump into all of that and a whole lot more. Before we get to that though, guys, make sure that you do have the like and the hype buttons pressed. Also, why not hit that subscribe button if you are new around here, or if you've been lurking in the shadows. The vast majority of you who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so why not click that button? Make sure you see the videos every day when they come out, because I am posting daily, sometimes twice, even 3 times daily. And as always, as we go through this video, make sure that you throw your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below so that I can read and respond to as many as I possibly can. And I appreciate the conversations, by the way. I don't always agree with everybody down in the comments, but if I don't, that's fine. Or sometimes I'm challenging you. If I ask you, if you say something, I say, why do you feel like that? I want to know. It's a real conversation. It's not sarcasm. So again, throw whatever you got down in the comments. Okay. So as I mentioned, we learned yesterday, that being Wednesday, that Al Harris had interviewed for the Packers defensive coordinator job, which was his first interview of the cycle. That was kind of a bit of a surprise that Harris didn't have other opportunities lined up, because even coming into this season, he seemed like a guy who was the next up-and-comer. I mean, we all know him from his playing career, but as far as running in coaching circles, and yet nobody wanted to speak to him. Well, that changed with the Packers, and then, of course, we get to the Commanders wanting to interview him as well. So his official title is he is the defensive backs coach and passing game coordinator for the Chicago Bears. And before we get any further in this, I just want to lay out what a passing game coordinator does, because it dawned on me that we know what an OC does, we know what a DC does, and we know what position coaches do, but I'm not quite sure that a ton of people understand what passing game coordinator does, what a run game coordinator does. So let's just talk about that real quick. Essentially, the role of the defensive passing game coordinator is to ease the defensive coordinator's burden by studying the opponent's approach and tendencies with their passing plays. They're looking for nuances with opposing players. They're looking for situational play calling tendencies. They help create game plans, and they teach the why for certain coverages. If we get this look, or if we're in this situation, why is this the coverage that we want to play? They're almost like a mini defensive coordinator, but only for passing situations. Now, I bring this up because one of the qualities that the Commanders supposedly wanted in their new defensive coordinator was somebody with that level experience. Well, Al Harris has never called plays, but he has executed plays on the field, and then he has this experience where, at least as far as off the field stuff, like in the meeting rooms and stuff, he is acting a bit like a defensive coordinator, again, coming up with game plans, looking for tendencies, installing situational calls. It's just on game day, he's not the one actually making those calls. So I brought up Al Harris, I think back in November. I think back in November, I said that I thought Al Harris would be the Commanders' next defensive coordinator. And I mentioned some quotes in the video that I made way back then, and I want to bring them back up here because they are certainly enlightening. So here's what Al Harris said about Dan Quinn. Quote, this is, by the way, this was back when Dan Quinn was in Dallas, or either he was in Dallas or he had just left Dallas. He was I don't know. It was a few years ago. But Al Harris said, quote, if Q was to go and get a head coaching job, honestly, in whatever capacity he wanted me to come, I'm there. DQ tried to bring Al Harris with him from Dallas when he was first hired by the Commanders. However, when he reached out to the Cowboys and asked for the opportunity to interview him, They said, no, kick rocks. You can't take him. So Al Harris stays in Dallas, and then he ends up going to Chicago. So let's look at his recent resume. So Al Harris, he was the Chiefs' secondary and defensive backs coach from 2016 to 2018. In those years, the Chiefs ranked 4th, 11th, and 16th in interception percentage, meaning what percentage of passing plays ended in interceptions. 4th, 11th, and 16th. He goes to the Cowboys from 2020 to 2024. The Cowboys ranked 20th, 1st, 11th, 6th, and then 10th in interception percentage. This is his only year with the Bears. They were 1st in interception percentage by a massive, massive margin. Credit to Nikki Jabvala of The Athletic for sharing this quote from Dan Quinn about how Al Harris was influential in shaping his defensive philosophy. Here's what it says, quote, "When I was let go by the Falcons in early 2020, I watched all of the defenses from 2013 to 2020. It showed that what was once good needed more changing. And so leading into 2021, to get connected with Joe Whitt and Al Harris, these guys are legit coaches in the secondary and the passing game. They were both influential to me, and they had a common connection to the DBs coach by the name of Emmett Thomas, so they had real principles about getting the ball out and playing coverages. They had played some other styles that I didn't play over the last 8 years. Those included more matching of routes as opposed to pure zones. So after I got done with that big cut up of those 8 years, I studied other teams on how they would play certain things." So let's talk about the upside of Al Harris. This man doesn't need an introduction. He was an All-Pro and a multi-time Pro Bowler in the NFL as a player. He was known for causing disruption, great cornerback. He would be a phenomenal mentor for Mike Sainristil and Trey Amos, kind of in different ways. Sainristil forcing turnovers, but not always being great in coverage, and then Amos being great at coverage, but not forcing turnovers. So, I mean, pair them up with a great defensive back, and boom, it should be able to help all of them. Not to mention the other corners that we have, or that we're going to sign, or that we're going to draft. He would just be great for the DBs. He is a defensive backs coach who would be making the leap to defensive coordinator, but that's his background, playing and coaching. Now, he doesn't have play calling experience, but he has been a DB coach for a long time, and being the passing game coordinator, like I laid out, that's about as prepared as you're going to be for becoming a defensive coordinator. If you're trying to make that jump, what job do you want before that? Run game coordinator or passing game coordinator, that's really where you're going. And in the modern NFL, I would prefer the passing game coordinator. He also knows the Dan Quinn system, which we learned was actually more of the Al Harris and Joe Whitt system. DQ used them to help himself innovate. He learned from them. And I bring this up because, again, going back to the qualities that the Commanders supposedly want from their next defensive coordinator, they wanted somebody with experience, and they wanted somebody who knew the Dan Quinn style of defense. Well, Harris was in Dallas DQ for 3 years, I think DQ was there. DQ said that he learned from Al Harris, right? He helped him shift his philosophy. There's a great relationship. Al Harris said he would follow DQ anywhere he went. So all of that stacks up. It lines up exactly how you would want it. The downside of this, calling defense is about more than forcing interceptions. The Bears defense, despite creating so much havoc, was actually pretty bad. And that's not always on the DBs, right? That can be not having the right pass rushing plans. That can be poor scheming and not scheming. What's the word? Sequencing. Poor sequencing. Not having everybody on the same page. Teams are imposing their will with the run, which means you can't play the pass that's how you would like to. Could be linebackers making mistakes. Could be communication on the field. Like, there's so many different things, but with all that being said, the Bears defense was not very good. This year, they were 25th in yards allowed per attempt on passing plays and 20th in EPA per dropback. So despite clearly not even remotely close leading the NFL in interceptions, they also were a bottom 10 secondary. Bottom 10 pass defense. Let me not put it all in the secondary, because again, there's other things that go into it. The pass rush has to complement the back end, and you have to be able to stop the run to then put your guys in the back end in more favorable situations. But whatever the cause was, whenever the Bears were defending against the pass, they did a very poor job on a play-to-play basis. They just happen to bail themselves out with these big chunk plays. Keeping it on the downside, there's the possibility that he's just another Joe Whitt. And I don't say that disrespectfully at all to Joe Whitt, because I will go to bat for that man once again. He had a sparkling career as a position coach. He was an excellent defensive backs coach. He fully deserved his opportunity at defensive coordinator. Did not work out. That happens sometimes. But what was Al Harris? Al Harris is a guy who's worked with DBs, knack for causing turnovers, worked with Dan Quinn, and he's making his first time jump to becoming defensive coordinator in Washington with Dan Quinn. The parallels between him and Joe Whitt, and granted Al Harris has a whole playing side of his career that's completely different, and likewise Joe Whitt has a whole coaching side that's completely different. And if you're a coach, I mean, Joe Whitt was the more experienced guy. Al Harris might see it through a different lens, but what I'm saying here is their resumes are, I don't want to say identical, but if you were just to like squint a little and look for the main points and draw the lines, they're almost identical. So, didn't work out for Joe Whitt, who's to say it would for Al Harris? Or is the opposite true? Should it have worked out for Joe Whitt, and it was just unlucky that it didn't, and Al Harris is the right guy? The bottom line for me is I thought the Commanders' options were boiled down to Carl Scott and Patrick Graham. Harris is a late entrant into this, and who really knows about Sean McDermott? I don't believe that Al Harris just popped up at the end. I don't believe that DQ and Adam Peters were looking through the resumes and said, oh, wow, I'm not comfortable with any of these people. I think we need to rethink our entire search. I don't think they're this far into the process and they're panicking and expanding. What I believe happened is they communicated to the Bears they wanted to interview Al Harris. Al Harris probably said, I'm focused on the playoffs for now. If and when we lose, I will then take an interview afterward. I'm interested, but that's how it's going to be. Considering the Bears, we heard nothing about Al Harris for the first couple of weeks when all the drama was going down. Al Harris was supposed to be this big name in the cycle, but it was very unexpected. It was very surprising that nobody reached out to him. Then the Bears lose over the weekend, and all of a sudden, the same day that we get the first report, the Packers want to talk to him, we get the second report, the Commanders are going to talk to him. I think this was planned. I think if the Commanders maybe had the opportunity to hire, like if they could have hired Brian Flores, or if they could have hired Jeff Ulbrich, because again, that seemed to be their top option, maybe they would have done it already, but this doesn't scream to me that they're panicking, they're worried. No, I think they had this planned all along, and it just worked out where the timing lined up, and they are now able to speak to Al Harris. So what I want you guys to do is go on down to the comment section, let me know your thoughts on this. It would be another risky hire, but also one that I would certainly be excited about. I would also crown myself an oracle for calling this back in November, but taking my ego out of it, I would be excited to see Al Harris, even though I would be worried because, again, he's got no play calling experience, but I think he's certainly one of the top options that are out there on the market. Before I get out of here, an update on Kliff Kingsbury. Diana Russini of The Athletic was speaking with Colin Cowherd on his show yesterday and said Kliff is on track to become the Ravens' offensive coordinator. Here's what she said. I know for a fact that Lamar Jackson and those receivers would like Kliff Kingsbury to run their offense. They've shown support. They've been vocal about it. Now, she had kind of indicated there that Anthony Weaver was going to land their head coaching job, and my impression was that Jesse Minter was going to be there. And I've also seen that Clint Kubiak is in the running, even though I think he's most likely to go with the Raiders. In my opinion, it is going to be Jesse Minter as the head coach of Baltimore with Kliff Kingsbury as his OC. And maybe Anthony Weaver's the DC. I'm not sure how that shakes out, but in my opinion, Kliff is going to be he's going to be staying pretty close here. I think he will be in Baltimore. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. Again, the big topic, Al Harris, the Commanders will be interviewing him for the defensive coordinator job. What are your thoughts on this man? Do you think it would be a good hire? Would you be excited? Any drawbacks? Whatever thoughts and feelings you got, make sure you throw them down below. Hit the like and the hype buttons. Again, if you guys did enjoy this, I appreciate all of you that already did. And subscribe if you're new around here. I'll catch you all in the next one. I appreciate you joining me. Have a great day.